At an air show packed with thousands, an F-16 had gleamed under the sun, until, seconds before takeoff, alarms had blared and red lights had flashed across the cockpit. Technicians had panicked, pilots had frozen, and the crowd had fallen silent. Then from behind the barrier, an old man in a worn windbreaker had stepped forward. Security had tried to stop him, until a colonel had dropped his coffee, staring like he'd seen a ghost. "Nobody touches that man," he had ordered. What happened next on that flight line became legend. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The airshow crowd held its breath as sunlight poured over the F-16 waiting on the tarmac, its canopy glinting like a blade. Minutes before takeoff, everything had been perfect. Fuel lines secure, pilot ready, dignitaries watching from the stands. Then the shrill alarm hit. One flash on the console turned into 3. Inside the cockpit, red lights bloomed like wounds. The pilot's hand froze mid-gesture, and the ground crew scattered, their calm replaced by frantic radio chatter. Something had gone wrong, fatally wrong, and the schedule that had felt unstoppable suddenly felt fragile. "Engines powered down," the crowd murmured, tension rippling through the air. And then out of that stunned silence, a single figure stepped forward from the civilians pressed against the barrier. He was older, dressed in a plain windbreaker and cap, moving with an unsettling composure. He didn't run. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked toward the grounded jet as if he belonged there. A young officer spotted him, hand raised in warning. "Sir, you can't be here," he shouted, but the man kept moving, eyes fixed on the aircraft, not in confusion, not in panic, but with the focused stillness of someone who already understood exactly what had broken and how to heal it. The man's steps didn't quicken, didn't slow. He moved like someone who had seen too many false alarms in his life to be rattled by one more. But his calm only irritated the young technicians more. One of them, barely out of tech school, stepped in front of him, arms wide. "Sir, we don't have time for this," he said, trying to keep his voice firm. "You need to step back now." Another crewman, bolder and sharper, added under his breath, "Probably thinks it's a museum piece." The F-16 pilot had already dismounted, throwing his gloves onto the cart, muttering something about a wasted window. From the VIP bleachers, officials began shifting in their seats. Time was bleeding away. Tension thickened like heat rising off the tarmac. The old man said nothing. He kept his eyes on the jet like he could hear something no one else could. When the base crew chief approached, clipboard under one arm, headset askew, he took a more official tone. "I need to see some ID," he demanded. The man finally spoke, voice low but steady. "She's hurting," he said, nodding toward the jet. "I think I know where." That earned a laugh from someone behind him. The chief rolled his eyes. "This isn't a classic car show, old-timer." But the old man didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed, not with nostalgia, but with precision, like a craftsman staring at something he once helped build, quietly aware that everyone else was looking in the wrong direction. The old man lowered himself beside the maintenance cart, with the patience of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. From his windbreaker pocket he drew out a faded canvas roll, edges frayed, leather ties dark with age. He unwrapped it carefully on the metal surface, revealing a small array of tools. Odd, uneven shapes of steel, each one clearly handmade. The crowd of technicians exchanged amused glances. "Sir, that's classified equipment," one of them said sharply, as if the words themselves could push him back behind the line. The old man didn't react. He was already touching the nearest wrench, running his thumb along the handle like it held a memory instead of metal. "I built the original models," he said quietly, his eyes not on them but on the jet. A younger airman barked out a laugh. "Sure you did. And I guess you flew to the moon, too. The others joined in, half nervous, half relieved to mock what they didn't understand. Around them, the younger crew kept digging into the avionics bay, tracing cables and screens, hoping the answer was where it should be. The old man's gaze drifted lower, past the open panel, down toward the underside of the fuselage near the intake. He didn't move closer, didn't interfere. He just watched, head tilted slightly as if listening to the silence between the hums of cooling metal. On the far edge of the tarmac, a master sergeant paused mid-step. Something about the way the old man stood, feet set wide, weight balanced, hands folded behind his back, felt achingly familiar. The smell came first, not jet fuel or tarmac heat, but something older, thicker, laced with smoke and sand. In his mind, the desert heat rose again, brutal and breathless, the air pulsing with distant artillery. The hangar had been a torn-up shelter outside Riyadh, half its roof missing, the floor slick with hydraulic fluid and sweat. An F-16 sat there, groaning under its own weight, riddled with shrapnel from a near miss. They had less than an hour before it needed to be airborne again, and no one believed it was possible. No one but him. His hands were younger then, steadier maybe, but already scarred. The same tools he unwrapped today had been unrolled then, beside the wing strut, beside the blood. Iron Hand, the crew chief had muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. Guy's got steel in his bones. He hadn't answered. He never did. He just gave the valve one final torque, watched the pressure stabilize, and stepped back. She'll fly, he'd said. Just like that. And now he stood decades and continents away, but the expression on his face hadn't changed, watching the confused technicians repeat the same diagnostics, same desperation, same problem. But the answer was still exactly where no one was looking. The young officer's face was burning now, part embarrassment, part panic, but mostly fear of losing control. Radios were lighting up. The command tower had noticed the delay, and the flyover window was closing fast. He stepped toward the old man, voice louder this time, clipped and official. Get security, now. Escort this civilian off the flight line immediately. A few airmen hesitated, glancing between him and the still silent figure at the edge of the aircraft. But before anyone moved, a voice somewhere across the tarmac broke the tension like a gunshot. Wait, hold on. Hold on. A colonel, base staff, crisp uniform, coffee splashing from a paper cup gripped too tight, stood frozen. His eyes were locked on the old man, narrowing like he was trying to match a face to a ghost. Oh my God, he whispered, barely audible. Is that Iron Hand Vickers? The cup dropped from his hand. He turned without another word and sprinted to the nearest command radio. This is Colonel Tanner. Get me base operations now. Lock this down. Moments later, every frequency buzzed with a single directive. Nobody touches that man. Within seconds, the energy on the flight line shifted. The crowd, sensing something had changed, began to part. Security halted. Heads turned. And from the far end of the tarmac, a black command vehicle was already racing toward them. Engines growling, tires screaming against the heat-slick concrete. The command vehicle hadn't even rolled to a full stop before the back door flew open. Colonel Tanner stepped out, not with ceremony, but with urgency. His gaze swept the flight line like a blade. Clear the area, he ordered, and every technician, officer, and curious onlooker scattered like leaves in the wind. No one questioned it now. No one laughed. The man they dismissed as a wandering relic now stood alone beside the jet, and the silence felt reverent. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask permission. Arthur Vickers, Iron Hand, moved with purpose that didn't need explaining. His eyes scanned not the cockpit, Not the humming screens or diagnostic panels, but the undercarriage, the seam near the wing root where a soft hiss escaped into the hot air. "You're fixing the brain," he murmured, barely loud enough to hear. "But she's screaming from the spine." From his canvas roll, he selected a single tool, an odd bent spanner with a flattened edge. With the ease of someone setting a piano key back into tune, he leaned down and tapped once. A soft metallic click, then a whir. The F-16 stirred. Just a blink of life at first, then full cockpit illumination. The HUD screen pulsed green. A low voice from the console crackled on. "Main systems online," someone whispered. He just brought her back from the dead. And no one even breathed, because somehow, in all their expensive training and tech, no one had thought to look where he had. No one had understood what she'd been trying to say. But he had, instantly. The library was quiet in the way only military spaces could be. Disciplined silence, full of intention. At a far table beneath a hanging light, Arthur Vickers sat alone, a thick binder of decades-old technical orders open in front of him. His glasses low on his nose, tracing familiar lines with the calm of someone rereading old letters from a life well lived. Across the room, the young officer paused with 2 coffees in hand, the weight of recent days heavy on his shoulders. No swagger now. No clipped commands. Just humility. He approached slowly, placed a cup on the table, and said softly, "I wanted to thank you. And I'm sorry. For everything." Arthur looked up, expression unreadable, then gestured to the empty seat. "Sit with me, son," he said, voice warm but firm. "You can't lead a machine if you don't first learn to listen to it." Nearby, a junior tech leaned over and whispered, "That's Iron Hand, isn't it?" And the officer, no longer just an officer, nodded without looking up. "That's the man who saved my career." They didn't talk about failure or pride. They talked about flight, trust, and the art of knowing when to listen.